I'm calling this week 2, however, for the record, this is actually week 2 and the first half of week 3 because, my period came in the middle of the week. So spoiler alert, this is going to be mostly about my period, which was not great. The first half of week 2 actually wasn't too bad. I had sort of the same issues as in week 1, but maybe to a lesser extent. My muscles still hurt. I still had troubles with focus, and I still had to move around a lot. That said, if you remember how we talked about the 3 waves that I experienced in week 1, well, in week 2 I stopped feeling the first increase, so like the medication kicking in around like 40 minutes. That became much less pronounced in week 2, which was really good. However, in terms of things that were less good, I was starting to have more and more trouble starting the medication at 9 a.m. At the time was sliding more and more towards 10 a.m. because I was experiencing something which at the time in week 2 I still refer to as Elvanse crash. My understanding of that has shifted a little bit. I believe you would say Elvanse crash is the thing that you feel when the medication is dropping, but the fact that I was feeling it, way past the time when the medication was supposed to be out of my system already, that makes me feel like it was another side effect. I will still refer to it as part of Elvanse crash. However, just know that that might not be technically 100% correct. I sort of started running out of steam, really. You know how when you have ADHD, you get really hyper about something, and then that sort of excitement starts dropping and suddenly things become a little bit more difficult. Does that sound familiar? That was exactly what started happening to me. The fact that I couldn't do any sort of work-related tasks, that I knew that I would need to stick to specific diet and specific schedule to make the medication work for me. There was this stubbornness about sort of wanting to have more control over how I went about my day. It also felt like I was not able to rest, right? Because every single day had to be a day where I was on and I was ready to do stuff. Those were the first signs that instead of the medication being the thing that would help me, I would be the thing that was supposed to help the medication. That sounds really weird. Okay, let me try to rephrase it. I think the focus was on making the medication work rather than having the medication be the thing that helped me do better, if that makes sense. It wasn't all bad. I mean, on Tuesday, I think I said that it was the best day yet. But then, we got to Wednesday and suddenly I was having this weird switch between shivering and sweating, and it seemed like something was a little bit off. I was really anxious and I couldn't really figure out what was going on. There were some symptoms that would end up being consistent across me taking Elvanse, but then there are other things where, the anxiety was peaking to the point where that seemed a little bit excessive, and same in terms of low mood, depression, those sort of things. And that is when my period enters the chat. Initially, I was really relieved because in my head that meant that the medication was working fine, that this was just my body. It's me, I'm the problem. So it was going to be all fine. It wasn't all fine. My PMS was probably more or less what it would have been if I wasn't on medication. That is not my issue. The issue is what happened during my period. So on that Friday, when I started my period, on day one that usually is entirely painless, I could not get enough painkillers to get rid of the pain I was feeling. I think usually on day 1, I'm not even on any painkillers, or maybe I'm on 1. It felt like the painkillers weren't working at all, frankly. And also I was having digestion issues, which, okay, to be frank, I do often have digestion issues during my period, but on day 1? No, what's going on? That was not fine. That was very much not fine. By the way, remember the thing that we mentioned in week 1 about being close to the bathroom? Yeah, this is relatable yet again. It probably wouldn't have been if I didn't get my period that week, but I did, so yeah. It is what it is. Since then, I've spoken to my doctor and she said that most people feel like the medication is working less effectively during their periods. And that was not the case for me. I still needed to move a lot. And now imagine feeling like your painkillers are not kicking in, but your body is restless and you have to keep on moving. Then I got awful nightmares that night. Like, absolutely horrific. The fact that my doctor was surprised as well. I mean, that in itself is probably a bit of a red flag for how the medication interacts with my body. Count all your Elvanse red flags in the comments. From her perspective, it didn't make that much sense. Perhaps because I wasn't used to the medication yet, that's why I was experiencing it as much. But more on that in the future videos. Full disclosure, do what your doctor tells you to do, not what I did. Day 2 of my period is usually the most painful, and I was already having a lot of issues on day 1. I just didn't want to risk it. I just decided to break the rule for that week and not take my medication. Surprise, surprise, nothing. No symptoms for the whole day. I was obviously, a little bit fatigued and, stuff like that, as you would be on your period, but no pain. Don't get it twisted. I was still taking painkillers as I would, but usually on day 2, that would be like one of those days where even while taking painkillers, I would probably feel a little bit of pain poke through. But this time, no. When was the last time you said you loved your day 2 of period? So I could say that there was something going on in terms of the interaction of my hormones and Elvanse, especially since when I started taking the meds again on day 3, again we're back to the same scenario as on day 1. A lot of pain, digestion issues, just generally not a good time. On day 4 it was pretty much the same. Maybe just slightly less painful. Day 5 was no better. I felt like I was stuck in some sort of Groundhog Day scenario. Maybe the pain was, progressively getting a bit better day by day. Technically, I was supposed to be on 40 milligrams already at that point because I was going to switch to 40 after 2 weeks. I decided to continue sticking to 30 until I finished my period. I just didn't want to have even more side effects, because the one thing that's worse than being, in pain, having digestion issues, and generally feeling badly is to feel exactly the same thing, plus side effects of moving to a higher dose. I also had a meeting with my ADHD prescriber scheduled for that day. We spoke about the whole situation. Again, I don't know if this was my ADHD period, Elvanse, whatever it was, but I just felt like I must have not conveyed the information to her in a way that she would understand what an issue that was for me. Her recommendation was to remember to take magnesium, which I was already doing. The only thing that I can think of is that I was switching from magnesium citrate to glycinate just before my period. So perhaps there was temporarily less magnesium in my system somewhere between that time. I just couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't taken seriously enough. She obviously has seen many other patients who are on the same medication as me, so she has a better understanding of what consists a serious issue and what doesn't. She did mention that some things that I was experiencing were a little bit weird, specifically the fact that for me the medication was equally as strong as it was before my period, and that I was having some of those issues with pain. Also the fact that the restlessness was not really going away. I was having a bit of a crisis of faith in the medication at that point. Am I really going to refer to it as crisis of faith? That just sounds really strange. Okay, well, I mean, it's accurate, but it just sounds strange, honestly. The meeting with the ADHD prescriber didn't really help me to figure out how to fix what I was feeling. So I decided to make Wednesday the day without medication for week 3. My brain would get really frustrated if I had to think about something for too long because it wanted to, take action and take action immediately. Having that on top of being on my period, on top of just generally being fatigued from the whole process, it just made sense that I needed a day to think about things, to just think about things. And this is where we're gonna leave it, because then on Thursday I took my first dose of 40 milligrams, so that's gonna be in week 3 video. If you got to this point of the video, you might feel like, okay, well, that was a horrible week. And it really doesn't make me feel like I want to take this medication. Thank you so much, Carolina. I'm so glad that you were here to tell me what a horrible journey this is going to be. I just don't want to leave you in that space. So let's look at some facts. 1, this is only week 2 and it takes about 2 weeks to adjust to the medication. And obviously for me that process was slightly disrupted because I got my period in the middle of week 2. So from that perspective, yeah, I probably felt things slightly differently than I would if I was to not have period in week 2. 30 milligrams is not a full dose for an adult. You might experience more ups and downs than you would if the dosage was being able to cover the whole day. I was not having that in week 2 because the medication would drop before the end of the day. I guess that can contribute to you having more mood swings in terms of, how you feel on the medication versus the contrast of like how you feel when you are not on the medication. Again, point 3, I was on my period, and that is a big deal. I already have some hormonal imbalances and so forth, so my periods are usually more painful than average. My PMS is worse than average. So again, the fact that I was feeling as frustrated about the whole situation, that kind of makes sense considering my medical history. I'm not saying that if you feel the same way as me, you should just persevere through it and not tell your doctor. No. Absolutely tell your doctor, absolutely discuss with them if there's anything you can do to improve it. The only thing that I'm trying to convey here is that your period on Elvanse might look very different than mine. Point number 4, now that you know that I had those issues on my period, you can research it for yourself and be more prepared for when you have your period. If you can take the medication for less than 7 days, 6 days a week for example, I recommend that you save one of those days for your period, just so that you have that 1 day of rest. And number 6, we spent so much time talking about magnesium in the last video that it's just really funny for me to have to be mentioning magnesium again in this video. What my doctor said is that to make your periods easier in advance, you should take magnesium. And that's all I'm gonna say, but in all seriousness, that's one tangible step that you can take to make your periods a little bit easier. And now let's go through the list of side effects. Again, they are probably not accurate for what your experience of week 2 will be, for obvious reasons that we discussed within this video. All the same, let's go through the list. Sweating, same as week 1. Muscle aches, try to do whatever you can to keep your muscles from cramping. A bit of stretching, a bit of yoga, whatever you want. Restlessness. So I'd say one good thing about restlessness is that it makes you move more. So from that perspective, it is maybe making me a little bit healthier. But in terms of not being able to work on my laptop, especially during the peak of the medication, that is devastating. A little bit of a spoiler for next videos, it does improve when you switch to 40. My doctor recommended that I just have more protein snacks throughout the day. That was another reason why I was a bit frustrated with the meeting. As we spoke before, I was really diligent about tracking my protein intake, so that the idea of having more protein snacks during the day, it just didn't feel like that was the step that I was missing. And maybe that was slightly on me. Again, if you have ADHD, you know that sometimes trying to explain something coherently to a doctor can be difficult. Period and GI issues. I wasn't really experiencing any sort of digestive issues in the first half of week 2, but obviously during my period, they became quite a bit of a problem. And again, I want to emphasize that I'm no stranger to GI issues during periods. I feel like this is all a bit TMI, okay, but I just want you to have the right sort of picture of what was happening. But since this was only one period and it happened in that week 2 when I was still adjusting to the medication, it might not be something that I experience on a regular basis. On top of the list, yet again, for a second week in a row, is Elvanse crash. I am still putting into that same box the issues that I'm experiencing after the medication already drops out of my system. Feeling irritated or sad, almost this stubbornness about the fact that I don't necessarily want to wake up the next morning and have to take that medication again. Frankly, I even think that it was worse in week 2 than it was in week 1. In week 1, I was hyped about taking this medication. I was excited about the fact that I was able to do things that I have not been able to do without the medication. ADHD is all about interest, right? If you are not only not interested in taking your medication, but also you actively don't want to take it, how likely is it that you're going to be able to stick with taking it for months or even years? We spoke about all the strategies in week 1, right? Protein, electrolytes, magnesium. I think beyond that, the only thing that I can recommend is to have a support group, and that can be your friends, your family, an online community. One way or another, you will probably experience some side effects while adjusting to the medication. and you're not going to be able to resolve them immediately. So it's really important to be able to speak to someone about what you're experiencing, about, you know, your fears, your struggles, your frustrations about the medication. They don't need to know how to fix your side effects. They just need to be able to support you emotionally through this process. I hope listening how Elvanse influenced my period was useful for you and will help to make your journey a little bit easier. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!